What are your thoughts on what lay ministries within a parish can do for families and the person who's living with dementia?
Sure. Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of different things in place in different parishes. Of course, resources will vary depending on the number of peoples in the parish and that kind of thing. But just, dementia is not a new thing. This is something that's been around for a long time. We're still trying to, medically wrap our minds around it and stuff, or sometimes it wraps itself around our mind, as bigger things that are a little bigger than us. But we have a lot of experience with that. Maybe not each of us personally, but as a collective as a people. And every parish has people who have cared for persons with dementia, people who are suffering from dementia. And it's a tremendous ability just to pull people together. So as a priest, that's another reason for contacting a priest. You come to me and you say, look, Mom, I just got diagnosed with dementia, and it's a struggle. I just don't know how to proceed with this. And so I said, another parishioner, told me if there's anybody that could ever be of help, cared for a person with dementia, and would love to be able to, would you like me to put the two of you together? You see, and then that could be a beginning of others who know, and then next thing you know, we have a little support group.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's more consoling than to know that there's somebody else out there that has a similar experience to me, and then I can lean on that experience. We deal with all kinds of issues in the church. We have, courage groups with same-sex attracted persons getting together and strengthening one another. And the church is teaching. We have people who have lost a loved one, so bereavement groups, and they'll say, well, man, I don't feel like I want to go to church anymore, and everything. Oh, I had that too, and this is what somebody told me that was helpful for me, and they share with, and it gets better, and that first anniversary, and how we got through that first death anniversary. So that's a very important thing with regard to a larger parish can have speakers, a little speaker bureau. So we have different connections, and you bring people in like once a month to speak about it. Some maybe a professional that's either in the medical field, or maybe with regard to home health, or maybe in bereavement, or maybe in the spiritual, just like how to pray with somebody who's suffering with dementia, because people pray differently. And as our life transitions, we pray differently. So different ways to be able to minister, for example, to them spiritually is very, very helpful. And so we bring those people in into a group. So that's a tremendous. The other thing is with the person's permission, prayer, to put them on the prayer, you see. We have parishes normally have and people take it very seriously, especially our shut-ins, our nursing home residents, persons who spend a lot of time in prayer because they're retired and they're really kind of giving their life over to prayer. And their prayer warriors, and to pray for the family that are caring for the loved one, to pray for the person that's going through the transition. Sometimes there's some anger associated with kind of that curve coming into dementia, or the original experience with symptoms. And for that person who is experiencing that, and also for the caregivers, prayer team. And then also I think there's we have in most parishes Eucharistic ministers that go and bring Holy Communion for the sick and the shut-ins. But to even have that, I've tried to do that in some of our ministries, where I have them bring communion at a certain time, but other visits, not for communion, but just for prayer. You see, just to visit over a cup of coffee and stuff, and then to pray with the person. And so we have volunteers, we train volunteers about how to listen, how to visit, and then with a repertoire of prayers, and what might be the most appropriate to be able to assist the person pray with them. And the patients tremendously appreciate that and benefit from it. So that's the thing that the priest can't do at all, but he can certainly be kind of an overseer and somebody to give the resources for that to develop in his parish.
Something you said was very interesting. Training those to go into the home. What does training look like, and what's the benefit of training your ministry, your lay?
Oh, it's important. I mean, because one is we want somebody that loves the Lord, and that wants to be of assistance to the sick and the suffering. Not everybody does, you see. People like to do ministries that are cool and that are high visibility, giving talks on retreats and seeing people having this conversion. So not everybody, these persons, that's kind of an entrance level into ministry. And the Lord has stuff for us as we progress. We need more mature persons who are able to be in the background in a very hidden way, and to assist it. So we have to kind of, excuse me, weed through the person that might be interested. We have to make sure that there's something competent. And then, so I require that they be living a spiritual life, that they be a man or woman of prayer. And then they have to learn how to listen, because people who are suffering and sick, they want to tell their story. And we have to be, as a caregiver, we have to have a poverty of spirit, or we have to be poor of heart. There has to be room in us for the other person. So the other person feels like the world is very fast, it's moving very quickly. They're not the attractive, beautiful people. They're not the very productive, the funny people. They're not the ones that everybody is like standing in line to be around. So they find themselves kind of alienated and kind of maybe thrown out. And this is kind of our culture. It's a very into function and productivity. Oh, yeah. So there's a bell curve, and you get that 0-10 at about 50, 55, or whatever. And companies want to early retire you. They want to get you out, get the young guys in. You cost them too much, and you're not producing, and so they want to move you on out. You see, the pasture, if you will. But in spiritual life, it gets better and better and better and better. So asymptotically going off to infinity as far as our charity and our closeness to God. So each day is greater than the next day, potentially at least. You see, I'm growing in holiness. I'm growing in charity, praise God. And I want to today be able to be more for Jesus, more for others, even if my body is wasting away. So ministers need to understand that, so they have to be taught that. And they have to have room in them to be able to give place for the other person, so that the person feels, a lot of times people have been hurt, and because they've been hurt, they end up kind of putting themselves like a turtle, you see, or into a shell. And so they'll throw little, they don't maybe think about it, but they'll do little feelers out. They'll put out little feelers. We used to say run some traps, because we throw a few crab traps to see if the crabs would bite, and then we wouldn't put them all out. We'd try a few and see how it goes. So we run a few traps. It's a little idiom we use down here. So they'll run a few traps to see whether or not you're that interested. It might be something not that important that seems trivial, but they want to see how you're going to deal with this trivial reality that they might be speaking about. And if you wait it out and you have patience, then here comes, they become much more substantial in what they share. So people need to be taught that. And then about how to pray is, I learn how to pray with someone by listening to them. And so if I've listened to them, I see what their fears are. I can kind of perceive what their fear, I can what they're concerned about, what they're nervous about, what they're excited and joyful about. Maybe there's some family dynamics that might be manifested. And so when we get ready to pray, then I can weave that into the prayer, you see, and do something that's appropriate for them. Being attentive to them while we're praying, in the sense of not being too long in our prayers and wearing people down. People who are sick get easily worn down, and so they can't sustain sometimes long visits. They can't sustain long prayers and stuff. And so we mean well, but they're not. What's appropriate for me as a healthy person in my prayer life and in my spiritual exercise is not appropriate a lot of times for them. So, and this is mainly common sense, but we have to just gather that information. So we go through some training with our volunteers, like I did at the hospital as well as with hospice, and visiting the sick, about trying to be Mary to Jesus, if you will. Jesus is in them suffering, and then how did Mary approach it? So to try to be that, kind of have that Marian dimension in our going in haste to be of assistance. And sometimes it's all I'll go even as a priest, and they need to put the trash out, there's some dishes they need to wash or whatever, they ask me, and I'll ask them, and so sometimes my visit even as a priest becomes pretty menial, you see, and it's beautiful, because that's what Mary did, you follow me? Mary, who could pray more than all of us put together, was prayerfully washing dishes and washing diapers and cooking or whatever she was doing for Elizabeth. And at the foot of the cross, she was just weeping and sharing. So it's not so much about doing, it's about being sensitive to the mystery, the reality. So we just try to communicate that, it's not a technical thing, it's more of a spiritual type of formation and training.
Yeah, I think it's really important, because my sense is that sometimes, maybe not the caregiver, well, it could be the primary caregiver, but other family members or friends, they don't want to come around because they don't know how to
Yeah.
react. They feel
Awkward.
maybe they feel like they need to do, they don't. Yeah, it's awkward. So I think the training that's wonderful for the ministry, and maybe we all need training.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a very cultural thing in being active and that just to be able to be. What did I think one of the fathers of the church said on the feast of maybe St. Agnes said that it's better to be silent and be than to speak and cease to be. So sometimes when we talk too much and there's not a substantial reality. So we want to speak if words can enhance silence. And I know we're working with the sick, and it's so important as an evangelization. People talk about the new evangelization. Those that perhaps have been in the pews who are no longer in the pews because they've drifted or they're no longer practicing the sacraments. Maybe they're attending another church group or evangelical group. And how do we get these persons back into the sacramental life of the church, which is plug them back into life. And we need them. We need their giftedness, but they need the church and they need grace. So how do we do that? Well, ministry to the sick is so important in crisis that we show up. And I've seen it over and over again in nursing homes where the church doesn't show up, other groups do. Jehovah's Witnesses are there doing Bible studies, and these daily communicants who have been in the nursing home for 15 years or something have never seen a Catholic group coming in there and spending time with them. And these nice little ladies have been coming to them, every Wednesday for weeks. Next thing you know, they jump ship. And they die outside the church. And their private culpability is probably diminished quite a bit. But I'm not sure our culpability is diminished.
Right.
So it's an important thing is that, it is a little awkward. It is a little difficult because it's an experience that I'm not comfortable and I'm not that good at making it better. And men, we want to fix it. We want to make it better. But making it better is being with someone. And also I need to learn. I learn when we just watch somebody and be with them. This is what the Roman centurion did. He just sat down and he watched Jesus. He contemplatus. He contemplated Christ, not in the prayerful way, but just he had to wait and he just had nothing else to do. And almost in a drunken stupor, just gazed at Jesus. And seeing the man of his death, he said, truly this man was the Son of God. So we need this, you see. And this is why suffering is left in the world. So John Paul the Great is that why did Christ leave suffering in the world after, redemption? Because charity. That if I didn't perceive suffering outside of myself, I would never move from myself to reach out to them. And this is huge, that the world is a dark place today because of a lack of charity, not because of suffering. It's because we don't respond to suffering. And if I'm afraid, and that's how the devil will throw these things, my own human weakness, compute my heart for suffering because of my love of pleasure, and the devil will discourage me. It's always going to fail. You're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to hurt them if you go, you see. So I'll get all these little thoughts, and then it'll keep me at bay. Next thing you know, the person's no longer here, and they died maybe away from the church because I gave into these. You see. But just to be with the person is a real, sacrifice, real act of charity. And whenever we make these acts of charity, obviously light, and it's a flow of electricity, and the world's a lot brighter.